Hello and welcome on board the Morning Safari. This is a live safari for those of you who may have stumbled upon this site for the first time, and it's a great pleasure to have all of you along with us. My name is Scott. I'm teamed up with Tebs on camera. We've got Kirsty directing the show with Nikki lending her a hand, filtering through all your questions. To send in questions, comments and thoughts, it's very easy. You hashtag Safari Live on Twitter or send an email through to questions@wildearth.tv. As you can see, it's dark at the moment. It's very early in the morning here in South Africa, and it should start getting light in about 15 or 20 minutes. And it all depends on the cloud cover that's overhead. We got a really good amount of rain last night, which is wonderful because we had an initial storm in the afternoon which delayed the sunset safari ever so slightly by about 45 minutes, I think. And then a second storm came through a little bit later, just after we actually finished the sunset safari. So it rained until probably about 1 or 2 o'clock last night, I'm guessing. So really wonderful for this drought-stricken land. Hello to Oki in Oklahoma, who has, even before the safari got started, they let us know how remarkable the sound of all the frogs were that they heard on the Djuma waterhole camera, which is a live waterhole camera that brings a feed to you guys 24 hours a day. And Oki, you're right, it is absolutely phenomenal. Not only how loud the chorus of these amphibians are, but how quickly they are activated after the rain. So, magical stuff. And the good news is that in 15 or 20 minutes, when it does get light enough to be on foot safely, you are going to be going on a little bit of a stroll through the wilderness with Jamie Patterson. And I'm hoping that you are going to be able to find some of the smaller creatures like the frogs and amphibians and little reptiles and insects that are going to emerge after these rains. Not only the aquatic animals that enjoy the rain, but a lot of the insects too. Already last night there was flying ants, reproductive termites. Flying ants is the incorrect terminology that I often use, which is very naughty of me. But the reproductive termites, the winged elates, were emerging last night, very small ones. So we may find a lot of birds out today cashing in on all the insects that have emerged from this rain. The plan for myself is to start heading towards the northwestern corner of Djuma in the hope that the Inkahuma pride, a pride of 5 lioness, are going to have returned onto our property. So we're not too far from the area where I'm expecting to find some tracks. Morning, Sacrosanct. You would like to know if we didn't manage to locate any leopard yesterday on the sunset safari, and no, you didn't miss out on any leopard. There's some good news for you. No sign of leopard at all yesterday, actually, so we didn't even have any tracks to follow up on. And that's not to say they're not here on Djuma or Arathusa, it just means we're looking in the wrong spots, or their tracks are hard to see. They've been walking in areas where it's not easy to spot their tracks. Even now, we're going to have our work cut out for us, and what's interesting is I'm sure a lot of you will be guessing after a deluge of rain that it will be easier to track because the ground will be soft and muddy. To a degree, yes, but it all depends on the actual soil substrate in any given area. This road, I can assure you right now, if a leopard or a lion walked down it, it would be difficult to see. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump out to show you what I mean. As I jump out, you'll already be able to hear the frogs and insects that are calling quite loudly right now. So, I weigh as much as a leopard on average, and not much to see with regards to tracks, and that's even with quite fine ridges in my strops. We call this, I'm not sure what you may call this kind of shoe in your respective countries. And isn't it wonderful that people are watching all around the world? So it gives you an idea of what we're dealing with regards to tracking the animals down. Also bearing in mind that I'm talking to you guys a lot, I'm shining the spotlight at the moment around, I'm watching the road. It's not easy to have my eyes cast permanently on the road, which is not what trackers will do, but for those of you who are new, most safari vehicles in the Sabi Sands, or just about all of them, will actually have trackers perched on the hood. We call it a bonnet here in South Africa of the vehicle, and there's a seat on the front left where this funny virtual reality rig is positioned now, and their job is not to entertain the guests so much or talk to the guests so much, even of course it's promoted that they do, but they are allowed to focus on their major job, and that is to track and find animals. And by being perched up there and not having to entertain the guests as much as the guides are, they can really focus on looking up the road, searching around, also up in the trees and termite mounds for spotting animals. But we don't have that privilege, sadly. Oh, it's starting to rain. I'm not sure if you can see. There we go. You can see a very slight kind of drizzle falling, and there are a lot of clouds above us. So I was hoping that this wasn't going to happen, but we may need to get out some of our rain covering equipment. This, let me jump out so I can show you everything. Oh, it's starting to come down quite thick and hard now, so I'm going to have to be quick. I'm going to show you the sombrero quickly. Tebs is busy wrapping the camera up, so he's not going to be able to pan around, so I'm going to have to do human panning. This device is called the sombrero, and it's like a big hat that wraps around the camera and keeps that kind of stuff clean. Clean, by clean I mean dry. Here we go, Tebs. And for those of you who weren't on the drive yesterday, there's some good news. Thanks, Tebs, for the VR rig. So we're multitasking here. This little cover was from a raincoat. It's going to go on top of the VR rig. I don't think you can see me though, but it's on. The VR rig is now safe from the elements. Now a few more little bits and pieces, but as I was saying, the good news is we are fine-tuning the current rain system, which I've called the sieve because it doesn't work, and we have got a new one lined up, and it's hopefully going to be made very soon, so that's something to look forward to. I think just by the time we get everything covered up, I think the rain's actually stopped. Oh well, at least we're ready for the next little onset of moisture. Sorry about this, everyone, but this is an example of how this current system is not the best. Alright, just about there. Tebs is just trying to wrap the camera up. The problem is that the cover for the camera, imported from Italy or somewhere like that, is not the right cover, so it's not as easy as you'd expect it to be to get that cover on. Alright, one last step in this whole procedure is to plug my earpiece in, and then I'll be back in communication with all of you. And the rain has literally stopped completely. Oh! A reproductive termite just flew past me. Try to grab onto it to show it to you. It's quite a big one. Good. Hello to Basically in Massachusetts, and we are hoping that we can possibly see some frogs. You all good there, Tebs? Yes, most certainly. I'm not sure if you joined a little bit late, but I did mention that Jamie is going to be heading out on a bushwalk, and she will be in the prime position to search for frogs and show them to you. On the vehicle, we're very limited, basically, because the camera is stuck to the center of it, which means getting up close and personal with animals without disturbing them can be a little bit tricky, and we try as much as possible to not disturb the animals in any way, shape or form. And yes, most certainly Jamie's plan, and it's a cunning plan that she made in the... Oh, we went to another reproductive termite that I tried to latch onto. The cunning plan is to go out and do this bushwalk because of the rains and because of the likelihood of being able to find some smaller critters. Basically, we could get lucky though. The two kinds of amphibians we could see from the vehicle is a bushveld rain frog, awesome little frog that's got short legs and it like waddles. It's not really an agile jumping frog, it's a waddling frog with a big fat body and tiny little legs, barely big enough to carry its body. Either that or the giant African bullfrog. Those are two amphibious species that we could bump into on the roads, but the others will all be in small puddles and in the trees and bushes. Okay, just trying to get this flap out the way. I'm told it's causing trouble with the audio, so that should be a little bit better. Morning, Reese. Good to have you with us. And Reese is interested to know whether my heart rate increases and I get a little bit scared when I jump out the vehicle in the dark. Yes, most certainly. The dark means dangerous out here. During the light, I will be happy to explore this wilderness area far more so than in the darkness. And even when I just jumped out there, I knew I wasn't going far from the vehicle. I made sure I had a good scan around. What can be deceiving is that the camera may make it look slightly darker than what it is in some situations, and it may make the situation look slightly lighter than it actually really is in some situations. So that's something to bear in mind. But yes, moving around in the darkness certainly is a lot more scary and requires a lot more situational awareness, which is a great term, I believe, and a very important one as a guide or in the guiding industry. And to be aware of your situations and your surroundings is critically important to avoid being swallowed by something or stood on by something. And that means you're just listening, watching. So if you can see where I'm shining the spotlight there, there's a reproductive termite there. So that's the winged elate, a reproductive termite that I was talking about earlier. It's probably just under an inch in length. The biggest one we get you, and hopefully once it's a bit lighter we can try and find where they are emerging from, because if we can find an emergence point we will be sure to find a lot of birds there, possibly even some reptiles and frogs gobbling them up. Who knows? It wasn't too long ago that Peter Pretorius was lucky enough to have a hyena walking through the quarantine clearings, catching these flying ants in the air and eating them, and they're an incredibly high source of protein. So even hyena, a large carnivore, will feed on these little critters. It can be a very good place to sit and watch and wait. Hello, Bill. And you didn't realize it was so dark when we started in the mornings. It's getting progressively darker every day, and we will be changing the times to better suit these is changing sunrise time. So from the 1st of February, we will be going out not at 5 o'clock Central Africa time, it will be 5:30. So that's the plan. Ideally, we would have been adapting with 15-minute increments so that we can be more in tune with the sunrise and time things accordingly. But the decision was decided that half-an-hour increments were better. So that's that. But it's quite nice, actually. I mean, there's pros and cons to every scenario, I guess. And essentially now what's interesting is we're doing the night drive with the spotlights first thing in the morning, and we're finishing at night with enough light not to even switch on the lights, really. So we've kind of inverted the usual game drive practice. Usually you'll finish the end of your drive with a spotlight and start your drive in the morning with no lights required. But there's many different ways to skin a cat, they say. So we are skinning it upside down at the moment. I'm wondering from the 1st of February, we'll probably be going out later in the morning and later in the afternoon, but I'll wait for confirmation on that. Hello to Safari Dean, who would like to know if I have ever worked as a tracker. And no, not officially, Safari Dean. Usually the tracking role is done by a local African person, and the reason for that is that they have been spending so much time out in these surrounding areas, tending to cattle and goats and immersing themselves in this wilderness area. Now, even though for quite some time now there haven't been wild animals outside the reserve, the vegetation is the same, the birds, the trees, and the art of tracking a lost goat or a lost cow is the same as tracking a leopard or any animal. And their senses are simply far more heightened to the art of tracking. It's an art, it's a science, it's a jumble of different things, but it's an incredibly tricky thing, tracking down wild animals, and 99% of the time it is done by the local African people, whichever area you may be working in or on safari. Our first post-rain animal is the giant African land snail. This looks like an incredibly old specimen. Look at all the ants out and about around it. That's really awesome. And it got a little bit of a fright as we arrived. Understandably, we are far, far larger than it and have arrived with some bright shining lights. Before I forget, just to confirm, the afternoon or sunset safari times are not changing for the time being, so we'll keep you updated on that. It's just the sunrise safari that's going to be shifted half an hour later from the 1st of February, which is in maybe a week or so. I'm not too sure whereabout we are in the month. Oh, look on Tibbs, if you don't mind going to the top left of your screen, you can see the ants actually carrying away a reproductive termite there. There we go. Your focus is perfect now. Not easy to see, but you can see a few wings of reproductive termites that have already been dropped off, and they will drop their wings once they've landed, and then a male and female will start searching for a place to start their termitarium. But there you can see it now, its wings are up, the ants are carrying its wings and body and all away. So the first animal that's cashing in on the termites are the ants. I saw an absolutely remarkable video on termites just a couple of days ago. I'm not sure if it's true, but it certainly is believable. And what happened was, in the course of research and science, some people went and they emptied, I think, 10 tons of liquid cement down some cavities into a termitarium and returned a couple of weeks later and started excavating this termitarium. and they found what was an incredible city of columns and tunnels and fungus farming areas. I mean, it is absolutely remarkable how much goes on underground with termites, and literally what we're seeing above the earth a lot of the time, if anything, is just the tip of the iceberg. So these animals are incredibly crucial to the ecosystem, and not only do they do an incredible job decomposing and breaking down dead plant matter that is unpalatable by most other species, so really old, tough plants and plant matter really that they recycle back into the ecosystem, and also provide huge amounts of different animals with a source of protein. And to give you an idea of how many termites there are, it is said that their biomass outweighs that of all the mammals in this area. So there are absolutely millions of them. And even though we don't see them that often, that doesn't mean that they're not playing a crucially important role in the ongoings of what happens here and the nutrient cycles and the food chain. So Wilson, I don't think that snail was under any threat from the ants that we were watching. So they were focused on the termites. There's a little terrapin in the puddle ahead of us here. But I want to make sure I don't run it over. But there you can see it swimming towards us. But we'll make sure we don't squish it. But something to bear in mind when driving down the dusty roads of Africa, there are often critters everywhere. We've just seen that snail, now the terrapin in the puddle, which is essentially a freshwater turtle, a terrapin. Yesterday we had a chameleon crossing the road. So you really got to keep focused on what's happening on the road in front of you as you drive. I'll never forget, I was on an interview drive at a camp in the Sabi Sands, the first camp I went to. Didn't get the job there. But the girl who did get the job ahead of me, the poor girl actually crushed a tortoise on an interview drive. She did well to recover from that and boot me from that position. And we're good friends now, and she was a great guide. She's still working in the industry, but a terrible, terrible moment for her. She crushed this tortoise. You can imagine the sound. Not very pleasant. Monkey Man, you ask a good question and would like to know why are we changing the sunrise safari times, because you actually quite enjoy going out in the dark and potentially seeing the nocturnal animals. We should be doing that at night, like I said earlier. So we're kind of doing things upside down at the moment. The end of the safari should be into the dark, and there's a couple of reasons why. It's going to increase our chances greatly of seeing predators on the move. If and when we are with lion and leopard, it's more, especially lion, it's far more likely that they're going to start moving after dark than in the light. And our chances of being with them as they get active are greater in the afternoon into the night than us starting first thing in the morning, blurry-eyed, not being able to see tracks clearly on the road, and therefore the chance of actually finding them then is slim. So there's good reason why the safari industry around Africa kind of does night drives at night and not in the early morning, and that's just the way it is. And I believe strongly that it is better. Like I said earlier, the only thing that I would change is kind of 15-minute increments as opposed to half-an-hour increments, and maybe we'll be able to convince the powers that be that we can do that in the future. But I understand that there are complications for all of you guys joining us on these safaris of every few weeks we are changing the times. So that's their arguments and out of my control, sadly. But don't worry, soon the tables will turn and we will be out after dark for a short period of time where we can look for the nocturnal animals. One last thing on the topic, Monkey Man, and that is that we are currently actually not geared up correctly to take you on an effective night drive. So that is the fundamental reason why we don't spend longer out at night. Again, if I could choose, we would have equipment that allows us to film at night, so that we'd be doing at least an hour or so at night in the dark with infrared or nocturnal with night vision, because it's, especially in the summer months, you're going to be a lot cooler and more comfortable after dark as opposed to heading out at the time we do, and we will therefore also increase our chances of showing you things like lions hunting on the move and other nocturnal animals. But we don't have the right tools at the moment, but hopefully in the future we will get those tools, and then we'll be able to spend entire nights out filming animals. And the reason why it's so important to have infrared or night vision is because, like I said earlier, we try and impact on the animals' lives as little as possible, and by shining a spotlight in the middle of a pitch dark evening, you're naturally going to be having a large impact on the animals. So it is what it is. But something to look forward to in the future, Monkey Man. I'm certainly looking forward to it, and it will happen. We just need to be patient and also get more people involved in Safari Live. That way we can do the impossible. Currently we don't have quite enough people to justify massive changes. All right, so there is some wonderful news, and as I continue searching for the Inkahuma pride of lion, whose tracks I'm hoping to find shortly, we are going to send you across to Jamie Patterson, who is on a foot safari. Enjoy.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Sunrise Safari Bushwalk. And just before we leave too far into quarantine, I wanted to show you this family of hornbills that's been foraging around. So this morning's walk is going to be a little bit different because we want to go and explore the boon that the rain has brought to us. We're going to be looking around quarantine for all kinds of things that have started to come out. The hornbills are feeling pretty joyful about the fact that it rained last night. All the insects are already coming, the frogs are calling. I'm sure Scott has commented on that fact. And I really want to go and explore, see if we can find you some of the things that we haven't really had much of an opportunity to show you since the start of the summer. All the insect species, snakes, frogs, birds, everything that we should have been seeing, but it's been a little bit too dry. And it's such a pleasure to be out on foot and not be looking at the desiccated landscape that has been around us. Feel the mud under your toes. Well, not quite, because I'm wearing shoes and I don't feel like stepping over thorns. And just in general, explore and see what's decided to come wandering through. It's amazing how quickly it happens. Hello, Nyala. A couple of Nyala standing over there, nice and relaxed. The cool thing about the Inyala and the bushbuck that has been wandering around here is that they tend to habituate fairly quickly to people on foot around camps, which is why he's actually not even paying any attention to us, just keeping an eye every now and again before carrying on feeding. There's actually quite a few of them in there. It's just very, very dense vegetation. And while we stand and we listen, I'm not sure if you've been hearing the frogs that are calling. There was a raucous toad shouting out this morning. There's various other species that have already made their way out, rejoicing in the moisture that's in the air. And B. Wilson, you were saying it'd be great to see frogs since we hear them so often, but we hardly ever see them. And that's what I'm hoping to find, those little things that we've spoken about or that we might have touched upon but haven't really had the opportunity to see. I think we're going to go and explore. It seems as though that light drizzle from this morning is also eased up. It doesn't look like we're going to have too much rain coming through. So I wonder how much it was the wildebeest. We could hear the sort of sound of hooves stampeding earlier as we were coming out. And it's our favorite wildebeest herd on quarantine as usual. Hello guys. The one thing about today is that it is fairly windy, and probably after last night, we've spoken a lot about it before, how these stormy nights for animals that could be potential prey for lions and leopards and other predators, those stormy nights with lots of wind are actually pretty scary. We noticed it yesterday just driving between DRC and Engers. All the animals were incredibly skittish, absolutely terrified about the fact that we were coming through. So these guys are currently standing looking at us. The standard wildebeest. It's not quite an alarm call at that tone. Oh, little calves scattering. Hello guys. And I noticed yesterday, little wildebeest calves that we've been watching, first of all are focusing more and more on solid food, not suckling nearly as often. But also the fact that their horns are now about this big on the top of their heads, and they're starting to get that dark color of an adult wildebeest. Now usually with this particular herd, I've noticed you could actually walk in sort of into where they're going, the direction that they're going, and get right up close to them if you just sit down and let them come to you. But I think on a windy day like today, I don't know if we're going to be able to get up right close to them. And you certainly don't want an entire wildebeest herd panicking and coming running past. Well, that's an interesting point from Debbie. Debbie is watching in Vancouver, which she says is the ant capital of the world. And Debbie, you were wondering what species of ant we have here and what the most aggressive one is. Debbie, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I definitely can't list all of the ant species that we do have around here. But something like, for example, pugnacious ants, or drop-tail and cocktail ants with their abdomens pointing downwards or upwards respectively, they tend to be the most common species that we see. In terms of aggression, the matabele ants, if you really upset them, just have a look at this. Just because there's nothing more awesome than the way that a millipede moves, and we start to see them so often on bushwalk. The nice thing is, there's something that I always used to play with as a kid. A millipede or a shongololo, totally harmless. Hello, buddy. No? You don't want to come? So totally harmless, feeds off vegetable matter, unlike the centipede that they are related to. And the legs are the most incredible things, the way that they move in waves like that. They are incredibly toxic to eat, so humans definitely couldn't munch on them, and there's actually very few species that do eat them, one of which of course is the African civet. And one thing I might do is try and find you a pile, what's known as a civet tree. Look how cool that is. The awesome thing about the bushwalk is we get to get really up close and personal. Look at that segmented body. And the way the legs move in waves, so cool. It's a nice big one. There's a tiny, tiny, tiny little one that's just near it. The biggest millipede I've ever seen was probably about that much bigger than this guy, and probably about this thick. So they can get really, really large. This is a sort of a medium-sized one. Hey, little one. When I was a kid, shongololos were great things to play with. We'd pick them up and they'd curl up in terror, and then we'd wait and we'd let them relax, and then they'd crawl all over your hands, all over your arms. I'm not going to do that to him now. A little bit older and more relaxed about just watching rather than having to touch. but they do feel incredibly smooth. Now, each pair of those legs is so beautifully adapted to the way that they move up and over obstacles. Show you the tiny little one. Here's a minute little specimen, a little baby here. How sweet that is. Miniature version of the millipede. Tiny, tiny compared to the one that's just gone wandering past.
A minipede.
A minipede. Oh, yay, Andrew. I love that. Wayne, you were wondering if the millipedes or the centipedes are poisonous? Yes, millipedes are poisonous, which means if you eat them, you will become quite ill. They've got quite it's almost an arsenic type chemical within them. So we avoid eating them at all costs. Oh, he wants to climb on my finger. He's busy touching it with his head, exploring. Hello. It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you. Checking me out with his little antenna on the top of his head. You can feel him really lightly tickling my finger. So cool. Now he's climbing onto my finger. That was unexpected. Not where I was going with this, but oh well. So Wayne, yes, they are toxic, but centipedes are something different. Centipedes, and some of the viewers will be familiar with this particular aspect of my personality. Centipedes are my weakness. I don't know what it is about them. It is irrational. It's not something I'm proud of. It's something that I've worked on. But centipedes not scare me anymore. Obviously, I've lived in the bush for so long that it would be ridiculous if I was scared of them all the time. But they do provoke some kind of instinctive, atavistic, not a fear impulse, but definitely an impulse not to touch them. There's something that I don't have with snakes or scorpions or anything like that. Now, centipedes are venomous, which means they can sting or they bite and inject venom. So something like a snake is not poisonous, because you could, in theory, eat it, but it is venomous because it injects venom into you. And centipedes, which are relatives of millipedes, they're arthropods with those paired segments that they've got with the legs. In the centipede's case, it's one pair. In the millipede's case, it's two pairs. But centipedes are highly, highly poisonous. They have a very sore bite. It burns. And they can grow up to this length in this particular area. And for some reason, there's just something about them that I cannot handle. And just sitting here, just in this tiny space that we've been in, there's a pile of impala poo, impala dung. And already the tiny little dung beetles are starting to make their way in, as well as the smallest species of termites as well. There you go, that's exactly what I was after. Well done, Andrew. And look, this is actually a foraging team. They're going underground there. They've got a little tunnel.
Yeah, they do.
They've got a little tunnel that they're going into. So we're standing above a network of these termite, tiny little, I think they're harvester termites as far as I know. And because it's nice and cool, the workers with these pale bodies are able to come out during the day and are busy raiding. And some of them have moved right beyond Andrew and are wandering off down Quarantine. Look how cool that is. Look at the way that they move, and it's so clear that they're moving over a specific trail. And in fact, even if you look as they move, you can almost see the groove that they're making in the soil. Just wearing down of hundreds of thousands of tiny little feet over time. How cool is that? You can see their bright red heads compared to the paler bodies. And when insects are pale like that, you can almost always guarantee that it's something, especially with things like termites and ants, that it's something that generally only comes out either at night or on cold, cloudy days like we're experiencing now. And Andrew doing an awesome job. Some of them are actually wandering towards the impala dung that I pointed out as well. There's a trail of them that moves along here. And as foragers of plant material, that's what they're after. They're after bits of the plant material that's partially digested by the impala. Our millipede has wandered off. Now the termites are guided by a pheromone trail, so they have very powerful senses of smell in that respect. But Michael Fleetwood, you were wondering if the millipede that we were watching, if that has a sense of smell. My guess, Michael, is yes, but I actually honestly don't know. I've never really thought about millipede senses before. They can definitely see to some extent, and I've noticed that with most of the insects, they've actually got surprisingly good vision. And unlike us, they can actually see in certain insects can see in different spectrums of light. So some might see ultraviolet, some might see infrared. It's one of the ways that flowering plants utilize to attract insects to come and pollinize them. It's so cool because they basically guide the insect into the center. Millipedes, they can see, they can probably smell as well, but I honestly don't know. I've never thought about a millipede's sense of smell. And now that I think about it, shame, that poor thing is suddenly subjected as it crawls over your hand to the intensity of the scent. And you see, just walking a little way out onto quarantine, and already we've found a magical little world that we hardly ever get to see when we're out and about in the vehicle. So we're going to go look for more wonderful things to show you, and I'm sure we're going to find plenty if that's what we found in the last 50 meters. And while we do that, let's pop over to Scott.
Well, how awesome is it being on foot? I must say I am envious of you guys, and it sounds like you got off to a great start with Jamie. So good stuff, and let's hope that backpack keeps on working effectively. Now, often what happens is my mind plays tricks on me, and with the sound of the engine, plus the fact that I've got one of my hearing satellites plugged with an earpiece, makes hearing quite difficult. And I thought I heard guinea fowl alarm calling. Something like that. But I don't think it was. I think it was some aeromarked babblers that I just heard let off a little bit of a babble. I think that's what threw me off. And guinea fowl, the chicken-like bird, can be a very good indicator of danger, especially when they're letting out that alarm call of theirs. But false alarm. So I've checked. Yeah, the babblers, yeah. This is who I heard. Oh, there they go. So I've checked very carefully for any sign of the Inkuhuma pride, but no sign of them coming back onto Djuma. It's not to say they haven't though, and because of the huge amount of rain we got last night, there's a strong chance that they may have walked and had their tracks washed away, wiped clean, leaving no evidence of where they've been. But I'm going to continue to check a kind of general area where they could have moved, and where I feel that they're most likely to have moved if they did come across here. And maybe we will find some tracks, and if we do, then we'll know that they're quite fresh at least. So, got a train smash that we haven't got any sign of them yet. And it is important to remember, while we focus on searching for animals like lion and leopard, which do need time invested in them, it's not that we're overlooking any of the other characters of the African wilderness. We'll take whatever we can get along the way. But thankfully, it looks like the rain is not going to impede the morning safari any further. And I'm just going to pull over here so Tibbs can show you. There's a little bit of blue sky off to our right there. So there we go. Seems to be clearing a little bit, these clouds. Now, I'm not being selfish, wanting our safari to continue unimpeded by the rain. I'm merely days of gentle rain. Days of gentle rain. Catch up to busy in the Jamie's got a grasshopper. Enjoy.
And once again, we have found something for you. Here he comes. Let him come out. An elegant grasshopper that hopped onto our... Oh, hello. Now you're on my hat. Look at the amazing patterns of colour on it. Is he still there, Andrew? I can't tell. And if you look really carefully, within the inside...
He hopped off.
Hopped off. There he goes. It's okay, little buddy. My new best friend. And those incredible colour patterns are a way of him saying to people, hey, watch out for me. I am toxic to eat. In other words, I am poisonous. And the reason that they gain that poisonous, or get the right to bear those poisonous colours, it's known as aposmetic colouring, is the fact that they feed on a very noxious plant known as milkweed. Many of you will be familiar with milkweed. I'm sure you would have chatted about it before, will have seen it before. It's got a really white, milky latex and then very strange shaped seed pods, and that's what gives that elegant grasshopper the right to bear the colours saying, hey, I'm dangerous. And I want to try and get one more look at him. A lot of the time these grasshopper species exhibit what's known as flash coloration, although he does it less so because he's so brightly coloured anyway. But usually on the inside of their legs, they have either bright red, or in this case, bright yellow and black colouring. But you can only see it when the legs are stretched out and the insect is jumping. You're going to do it again? And basically what that is it has a startle effect. It's something used by the various species, including frogs. And I know a lot of you really want to see frogs, so I promise you that I will be keeping an eye out for them. And it's essentially that flash of colour. Whatever's trying to attack that creature is surprised by that, and then tries to disappear, or gets a fright, and then the animal that has displayed the flash coloration has jumped away and then folded in on itself, and it essentially makes itself a bit more cryptic. So cool. Another species that feeds on milkweed. That dung beetle nearly flew straight into my head. Wouldn't be the first time. Already the dung beetles are out and about, so I'm sure we're going to be able to find you some when we get to the piles of elephant dung scattered around quarantine. But another creature that feeds on milkweed is the caterpillar of the monarch butterfly. So all united with that aposmetic colouring. Just have a look at how awesome this little creature is. And I said to you we were going to go and look around the area. We didn't get more than 10 meters into quarantine. Have a look at this. This is a pill millipede, so a relative of the millipede that we were looking at earlier, all tucked up, curled up into his body. And I've never ever seen a pill millipede that doesn't do this. But look at the nice colour contrast with the black and the light colour. Awesome.
You can hold him like this.
I can hold him like that. Here we go. You can have a look and see it. Isn't he awesome? You can see all of the segments, and while I'm holding him like this, I can feel him moving inside just ever so gently. And obviously as soon as I'm finished holding him, I'm going to put him straight back where he belongs. So cute. Tiny, tiny compared to that millipede that we were looking at, but still the same deal. So plant material, anything like that. I'm going to return him right back where we found him, hiding under a log. Just goes to show all the things. We made it about 10 meters. One more thing I wanted to show you, which is, where did I see it? Oh, it was here. It was here, where all of the winged reproductive ants, so the reproductive termites that have wings. Now, many of our regular viewers are familiar with our termite explosions that happen just after it rains. All of the reproductive, or the termites capable of reproducing, start to come out and disperse. Most of them do not survive, and this is one of the reasons why. They're all trapped in this spider web. Now, I'm not sure what spider it is. I can't find the spider itself. I can't see the spider itself. But you can see, I think that these are actually being gathered by the termites themselves. That's interesting. Now, this would be more accidental than anything else, in my opinion. I actually don't think that the spider itself intended to catch something this large. But what's also interesting is that I think that these huge reproductives are actually the same species as these tiny, tiny little workers. So it just goes to show the size difference. It's amazing how differentiated the different termites are. So the workers versus the soldiers versus the reproductive members, and then obviously the kings and queens, much, much larger. So cool. All right, well, we're going to try and advance another 10 meters or so, and while we do that, we're going to send you back over to Scott.
So we've got some incredibly clean and dazzling zebra, and I'm hoping we're going to hear their call. They're a little bit worked up due to this wind. Let's try to roll backwards a little bit. We can't get you some good views of them, and I'm hearing some noises, and I'm not sure if it's them about to start their chorus, which sounds something like that. It's a wonderful call. Or if it was some hyena further away from us, possibly at the den site or from Vubu Road. But aren't they looking marvelous this morning? Hello to Ken, and as we watch these zebra disappear into some thicker vegetation, it's a good time to chat about your question. You're interested to know if and when it will start thinning out here in terms of the vegetation and making it easier to see animals. And it will be in the coming months leading into our winter, so anywhere from kind of April, May, June, it's going to start drying out considerably, and the leaves will die off most of the bushes. There are some evergreens, both trees and small bushes, that will stay green through the winter, but it does become considerably thinner than it is now and easier to see. However, we are not experiencing a regular summer in terms of lush vegetation because we're in a drought, Ken. So usually in summer we would be able to see a lot less far into the bush, probably about a quarter as far as we're seeing at the moment. So it's hugely different to a regular summer, which, to be honest, I'm quite enjoying. The weather as well as the more sparse vegetation is making our lives more enjoyable. It hasn't been nearly as hot this summer as it usually is over the summer months. It's been cooler than normal. From what I've seen, the vegetation is not nearly as thick as it usually is, which makes our lives a lot easier when looking for animals, when tracking. But it will be even due to the droughts. Now it's drier than normal. It's going to be a lot drier come winter. A lot less green around. I much prefer the winter, Ken, because of the weather and the scenery. It allows for easier safari going and longer safari going. The summer, I find, is quite limiting in this area due to the temperature, and also due to a normal summer you would have a lot more rainfall than we've experienced now, and obviously rain can quite often stop play when it comes to safari, or just make it unenjoyable. There's my little tip when we're planning your safari. would like to use my opinion, it would be the winter months that are the most effective in this area. Hello to Michael Fleetwood, who has been watching quite a few of the drives and is interested by the small amounts of zebra that we see here, and would like to know how often are they around and how many of them are there in general. Well, there are almost always some zebra around, just not that many of them, and it's the wrong habitat for zebra here, Michael. It's not open grassland. And the same goes for wildebeest. So that's why those two species we don't see in high numbers here. But they are kind of always around. We may just not be in the right place to show them to you on a daily basis. But to put things in perspective with regards to the Sabi Sands as a game viewing destination, it's incredible for seeing high profile animals like the Big Five. But I've had many a morning here when I was guiding guests where I would spend their final morning safari before they fly out at midday searching entirely and only for zebra. They've seen lion, they've seen leopard, they've seen everything except for a zebra come their last drive, and that's when you start panicking tracking the zebra, which is something that most guides in other areas of operation would never consider having to do, but that is a reality of the Sabi Sands, not the highest zebra numbers. Well, we saw one of the largest African land snails around earlier this morning, and it sounds like Jamie has just found a miniature version thereof.
And I do have another snail to show you. I have to confess, I know absolutely nothing about it, beyond the fact that it is not a giant land snail and the fact that it is an incredible bright yellow color. And in fact, with this view that we have, it's worth just sitting for a moment and watching it move because it's incredible. It is so fascinating. Slowly sneaking down beneath the log, exploring, looking for whatever food it happens to find. Those projections guiding it, immediately retracting as soon as they find something solid. It's so incredible. Look at the way they touch and then retract, guiding the snail, letting him know where the projections are, him or her or both, as is the case with giant land snails. This is one of the most fascinating things to watch. I wish I could tell you more about it. I wish I could tell you the name. I honestly have no idea. If you have any idea, please let me know. I'm more than open to being educated about it. I have to confess, perhaps my snail knowledge is not as it should be. But we just couldn't resist bringing you these incredible images. Just look at this. And the wonderful thing about bushwalk is that the cameramen actually bring you the most incredible images. We don't really have to work for it at all. They do, of course, with their giant packs. But nature just brings you the story. So cool. Absolutely fascinating. Watch it slowly disappear underneath this piece of rotting wood. And that bright yellow color? Why is it bright yellow? My guess would be, oh, sorry, Andrew negotiating around all kinds of thorn bushes around him to get in and get you that shot. Our cameramen are super dedicated. So why is that snail bright yellow? I guess because it's a warning to say to things, hey, don't eat me. And he's going to slowly wander down beneath this log, which is filled as well with those little termites that we were watching earlier. I'm not going to hold it up for too long because I don't want him to go under and then get squashed. Just gently lower it. Amazing. This is the first time I have ever seen a snail that looks like that. That's what's so cool about bushwalk. I've never seen one before. Oh, now I'm going to get up before my legs start to freeze up. And what we're seeing so many of, there's millipedes everywhere. Now, Hannah, you were wondering, just to finish up with our giant land snail, you were wondering whether snails travel with their senses or how they work because you couldn't see their eyes. As far as I know, they can see, but I'm not entirely sure because the way it looked like it was moving, it looked like it was feeling its way and then getting an idea by using those two projections on the top and then the two below, and then slowly navigating the obstacles in that kind of way. I have to confess, I don't know that much about snails. I've never really, up until this point, I've never really stopped to consider them. I used to go and play with them as a kid, let them crawl over my hand, let them leave their slime trails everywhere, but I'd never really thought about snail senses. So, something I'm going to have to go and do some reading on. I'm sure many of you know a little bit more about snails. Perhaps you encounter them in your garden. And there we go. This is what the elephants have all been after on quarantine. These are unripe, but marula fruits. And it won't be long before the elephants start to come, if they get here in time. Because they're going to have to compete with the monkeys, the baboons, the squirrels. Everything wants a piece of marula fruit. Now, me personally, I'm going to take this one and I'm going to wait for it to ripen because marula fruits do ripen on their own. Half eaten. Now, what we're doing at the moment is just wandering across this incredible open clearing that we have here. And Meredith, you were wondering about why it is they call it quarantine. Now, from my understanding, it was because this was where, depending on who you ask, strangely enough, I've heard different answers, but apparently this is where certain animal species were quarantined. Now, one story I heard it was cows, the other story I heard it was wildebeest. Cows sounds the most likely because before this was included and incorporated in a nature reserve, it would have been probably an old farm in some way, maybe a game farm, maybe a agricultural farm, probably a game farm. And this was the place where the animals were quarantined as a way of keeping them safe from transmission of things like tuberculosis or corridor disease or heart water disease, anything like that, and even possibly rabies. So this was a quarantine, it was quite literally a quarantine area. And while we explore this quarantine area and find you more exciting things, let's pop back over to Scott.
Now, I was hoping that we were going to see a lot more water than this at the Buffelshoek waterhole. But as Teb zooms out, you will see that even though we got good rain last night, the land is thirsty and everything has been filtered into the water table below and not much left for the animals to drink. But better than nothing. So at least there was some rain, but I was really hoping that there was going to be a little bit more water in this water hole. Hello, Teresa. And you brought up a good point. I'm going to continue chatting to you just once we've got through this little dip where we could lose signal. Hold on. Still with me? Sounds like you are. And Teresa, you are wondering whether there might be any fish eggs in this waterhole so that the fish can repopulate themselves once we do get some rain finally. And I'm not too sure. I don't think tilapia's eggs will actually survive the dry season, but possibly there's another small species of fish that did live in here whose eggs could survive a dry spell. I'm not entirely sure. But there are catfish that could well have submerged themselves in the mud, encrusted in kind of a mucus membrane, not encrusted, encompassed rather by a mucus membrane. And I have a tiny breathing hole that they can actually breathe out of. I'm going to take this road and then continue checking our northern boundary up to our eastern boundary. So the catfish will lie dormant, saving energy, and can survive for many, many months under the dry surface of the waterhole until eventually enough water comes and then they can wriggle out of the mud and continue living. Hard to believe, but they are highly specialized and have this capability. So there will be fish, hopefully, or there should be technically, and also what we need to remember is that there are other waterholes around us that have not completely dried up, and when very big rains do fall, fish will flow down the water courses and then land up in various dams downstream and waterholes downstream. So that is another way that fish can repopulate certain waterholes going forward. Hello to John in Pennsylvania, and you would like to know if some of the terrapins will hibernate when there's not much water around, because you notice that there's a whole bunch of them now heading towards the small pan at the Juma waterhole. And the correct term, I think, is estivate in times of dryness, not hibernate, and that's in times of absolute freezing cold. But yes, they may well do similar things to animals like crocodiles will also do this. They will find a dark, safe place rather, a little excavation. Maybe they'll bury themselves and just lie dormant, and that way really bring their heart rate down, and that way they can conserve energy for long periods of time until times of plenty return. So that certainly does happen. I'm not sure where the terrapins will actually hide, but I'm sure that they do literally just switch off and wait for better times. Yay! Some elephants! We can just stop right about here for now and just check and make sure that this herd is in a relaxed mood, which it looks like they are. This is a young bull on the left here. And they will certainly be very happy after a night of this rain. They'll know that it's going to bring them more lush vegetation, some more fresh growth, and also more plentiful water in the surroundings. Wasn't that wonderful? I just stripped all the leaves off this round leaf teak. Woodlands kingfishers calling around us. Virtual starling. And a lot of other birds. There's actually so much noise I can't work out who's making which noise. But the bush is alive after this rain, as it should be, and it's so good to be out exploring and sharing this with all of you. It looks like the rest of the herd are on the left of the road, and Tebbs is slowly making his way across there. This is probably a cow that we're looking at now, and then there's a few more cows and youngsters on this side of the road. Is this youngster going to give us a little display of its size and strength? It's possible it's got a little bit of a swagger in its step, but I think it Decided against it at the last minute there. You hear a hyena calling behind us. Just trying to work out where exactly it could be. But it stopped. Keep it in the memory bank though, because it could well continue calling and lead us to something exciting. What I love about watching elephants is that they're always on the move. They're always doing something, unlike a lot of the high-profile animals out here. And what I find, oh, hello you. What I find especially interesting is their fussy diets and the way that they really vary their diet greatly throughout the year. And always test certain plants, sometimes a little sniff, then not interested, move on to the next one. And discussing the things I like about elephants, Tanner would like to know my favorite thing about them. And I think their intelligence is one of my favorite things. Obviously their size and their trunk and their very unique anatomy makes them wonderful, but their intelligence allows us to, I wouldn't say fully connect, but there's almost a connection and an understanding that you can feel between an elephant and a human. You sometimes get a feeling that they know exactly what you're planning and what you're thinking, more so than the other animals, I feel. So it's probably the intelligence that puts them above all the other animals, I think, in general, other than the primates, who are obviously very closely related to us and also not too far behind us evolutionary. I guess another thing that I love about elephants is their ability to roam huge distances. They're not bound to a territory. They come and go and move wherever they please. Bob Spooner, hello. And you'd like to know which animals are most active after the rain? Well, probably more so than any at this time of the year. The snails really enjoy moving about after the rain. They require moisture in order to be able to move around, more so than most of the other animals here. So yes, the snails are high up there, but also a lot of the insects only come out and are triggered by rain. The mammals tend to carry on business as normal, as do the birds, so no major differences there. But it's mainly the smaller animals, the insects and the snails that are probably going to be more active than any other. Obviously the amphibians, the frogs, come alive with the rains. That's been evident already on the bushwalk mainly, where you've got to see up close and personal all those little animals on the move. Not yet a frog though, so we still need to try and find a frog of sorts. You get a beautiful frog called the painted reed frog, which we actually managed to find a couple of last summer. I remember Romeo, officially known as Jason, one of our cameramen who's now studying film at the University of Pretoria. He was with me, and we got a flat tire in the bush, and where we were changing the tire we noticed a beautiful painted reed frog right next to us on a thorny acacia tree. Some of you may remember that. Very small frogs that you can find away from the water, just latched onto a tree or a reed. Hello to Susan. in Colorado who would like to know if elephants all have that same kind of brown shade of eye. And yes, all the elephants that I've seen have had that very same brown color. It would be interesting if Indian elephants are the same. I can't work out why, but there's some kind of a light bulb flickering in this little brain of mine saying that I've seen a picture of an elephant with a different colored eye, a bluish eye maybe, and maybe that was an Indian elephant. But all the African elephants I've seen have got the same amber, orange, brown eye. Tibbs, let's see what this little youngster does. I've got a feeling this one on the left here may well do something for us. Come on, we are ready now. Show us how big and strong you are. Come along. Come on. And just to give you an idea, I mean, it's hard to gauge its size because there's no big ones next to it. But I'm guessing it's probably around 2 years old. And that's why it's got such good control of its trunk. Up until their kind of first birthday, that trunk can be more of a hindrance than anything else. Okay, we are going to send you across to ground level with Jamie, who's got some animals in the throes of passion.
And in this time of plenty, the millipedes are making the most of it. And in this case, we've got a ball of mating millipedes all wrapped together. I can't exactly tell you how many are there. I think there's 3 of them. There might be 2. It's a little bit hard to tell where one begins and one ends in this particular instance. And they are fascinating. Just by watching, we're learning so much about them. So for their first 4 segments, they have 1 set of paired legs as opposed to 2. And then right at the back of that 4th segment, you see that little sort of globe of white stuff? That is where they are mating, because in their 4th segment, that is, oh, look at that tick. Sorry, distracted. And they carry parasites just like we do. Ticks and mites are very, very common on the larger insect species, and in fact play a vital role in certain circumstances. The tick will be looking for a gap in the segments to maybe be able to feed off the millipede. But in the case of mites, for example with dung beetles, what they actually do is they clean in between the segments, and I imagine that it works the same for millipedes as well, so that they don't build up any parasites in the joints of their segments. All over the place. Now, there you go. That little globe in there, that is where the reproduction is currently taking place. That's where the seminal exchange is happening. So their reproductive organs are situated on their 4th segment. Here goes the tick exploring along. And speaking of millipede reproduction, which I have to confess I know very little about, Jen B, you're wondering if millipedes give birth to live young. I have no idea. I've been trying to work it out based on their structure. My suspicion is yes, but I'm not sure. And the reason I'm not sure is they're born perfect little miniatures of the adults. Now there's a couple of other arthropod species that are also that way inclined. So scorpions and spiders are the ones that I'm thinking about, where they're born and they hatch essentially exactly the same. Now in spiders lay eggs, and the eggs then hatch. And they quite often are looked after by the female. It's not that uncommon to have parental or maternal care within the arthropod or the insect world. Scorpions, on the other hand, at least out here, give birth to live young and carry them around on their backs, as far as I know. So the question is, do millipedes lay eggs or do they give birth to live young? I really don't know. I'm more than happy to hear from you guys as to what you think. It's a total mystery. I've never thought about it before. I've just always accepted, this is why I love going out on bushwalk, I've just always accepted that this is the way things are and never questioned more deeply. That's also why I enjoy the viewers' questions, of course. And there's something else down here. If I'm going to move over so that Andrew can come and have a look. There's a tiny little baby giant land snail. Now, watching this little baby giant land snail, I don't know how big the one was that you saw with Scott, but it's busy out and about looking for decomposing things to start to munch on. And Susan, you were wondering, and I'm going to apply this to the land snails as well as the millipedes because it's very similar. Susan asked about millipedes, but the application to snails is the same. You're wondering what their role in the ecosystem is. And they're So they are detrivore feeders. Sorry about that, we lost picture for just a moment, but it seems to be back up again.
Push the button down still.
I wasn't gonna say anything, but Andrew accidentally pressed a button. But what you must realize is that Andrew's doing the most incredible camera work with a very, very little working room to actually be able to do it. Look at the way it's going over that branch. Now if we're really lucky, as we watch this muscular foot move across, you might be able to see the breathing hole that sits underneath the shell and allows for gaseous exchange, essentially like a lung. It's going to be very tricky, and I don't know how Andrew's going to manage it. I'll be very impressed if he does, but he's looking at the right section of the millipede. Underneath where the muscle joins the shell, there's a tiny little gap that opens up every now and again and allows the snail to breathe. Oh, just look at the way it's stretching. Stretch, reach. Oh, missed. Didn't quite work. Attachment didn't quite work. Is he going to manage this? That's quite a reach. Bull! I'd love to know the cellular structure of the way that their muscles work. Stretched out like an elephant's trunk. I think it's managed to attach itself properly this time, pulling the entire, look at those. I was trying to figure out how snails see after that question from earlier. I'm still not entirely sure. Bull! Bull! Wow! Stretched right up there. And watching this particular snail, Kathy, you were wondering if the shell is a part of the anatomy or part of the snail's anatomy, or if they can crawl out of it. And no, they can't. They are attached to it, as far as I know. And damage to the shell will probably result in the death of the snail. They can heal it up though, because it's a living part of the snail. So it's grown by them, and then nutrients are supplied to it, and obviously it has to grow as the snail grows. This is a very tiny little land snail that's done a marvelous job of stretching all the way across onto this log. So cool. There's also a spider there. There we go. We have an answer to our millipede reproduction question. I'm not sure what spider that was. Sorry, Andrew. So, Judy in California, thank you. Apparently millipedes do lay eggs. So the guess was wrong. They do lay eggs, and they hide them underground, and they then hatch after a couple of weeks. Who would have guessed? I didn't know. Thank you for that, Judy. That's awesome information, and I will never ever forget it now. Well, we've made it another 10 meters along quarantine, still absorbed by the wonders that the bush has to offer. And while we look for some more, let's pop over to Scott.
Well, happy to hear that you got some incredible close-ups of the mating millipedes, the M&Ms, as well as a snail that came to spectate. Interesting stuff on ground level. These elephants are on the go slow, which is a sign that they are completely relaxed, not in any rush, just enjoying the cool weather, the fact that we've had some rain, and the fact that I guess the vegetation is slightly tastier than normal. There's not a fine film of dust over it, and they're really taking their time snacking along here. Hello AD on YouTube, who's interested to know if the elephants get hurt when feeding on a tree called the buffalo thorn tree. And no, I don't think they do. They're slightly more delicate with the branches of the buffalo thorns when plucking them off. But the leaves are very tasty, and you'd also like to know, AD, if any other animals eat buffalo thorns. And yes, certainly. Almost all the plants with thorns have developed the thorns for a reason, and that's a security mechanism to try and slow down the herbivores demolishing them. That's the only reason that thorns exist, and the main reason why thorns exist. So you tend to find the thornier plants are the tastier plants, whereas the plants without the thorns are typically less tasty, as a general rule. Now, the tree they're feeding on now is a bush willow tree. There's no thorns in it, so that's a good example of the fact that it's not always the case. But many, many animals will feed on buffalo thorns. Giraffes, the nyala, bushbuck, kudu, all of the browsers. Humans can feed on them. And I'll be able to show the rest of you a buffalo thorn that's just up ahead of us shortly once we move again. But before we do that, we'll enjoy this big cow who's making her way past us. Hello, Therese in New York, who's interested to know a little bit about the carving of elephants. Isn't she a wonderful big cow, this one? And Therese, the elephants, no, will not go into deep vegetation necessarily to give birth. And I've only once been lucky enough to stumble upon a herd of elephants after a female had just given birth. And it was in a big open clearing, and there were 6 or 7 females completely encircling the young calf, who at this stage could barely stand, and all 6 or 7 of these big females had their trunks nestled below the calf, trying to help keep it standing upright. It was an incredible scene, and what we learned from that is that they don't leave the herd in order to give birth. They stay with the safety and protection of the herd. Isn't the trunk a wonderful tool, the way you saw it reach up and snap that branch off? So there we have it, Therese. Hopefully one day we will get lucky enough to film an elephant giving birth. It's something that's rarely seen, and your timing would be incredible to be in the right place after a 22-month gestation period. If you look just behind the ear, there's actually a grasshopper. Oh, it's just gone behind a branch, but there's a tiny little grasshopper sitting on the elephant's hide. If you fully zoom in, are you fully in now, Tevs, and then go a little bit to the right, and a little bit more, and if we just wait here, there it is, you can just see it to the left of the big branch on the right. You can see a tiny little grasshopper in a crevice. There it goes into a better spot. Isn't that fascinating? Little grasshopper catching a ride on an elephant. Elephant back or elephant side safaris is what that little grasshopper's enjoying. Woodland's kingfisher just landed nearby and rattled off its call. Chick, brrr. And again, a wonderful sound of the summer. And the elephant, almost on cue there, was blocking its ear. It wasn't blocking its ear, it was just scratching its ear. And that funny little hairy tuft behind its eye there is its ear hold. It's hard to see now because it's quite thick bush, but there is a little kind of, there we go, now you can see it. You can see all those hairs there. That's the entrance to the elephant's ear, right there. And what's interesting is, unlike our ears, which are cupped like a satellite in order to increase our ability to hear, the elephant's ears are flat. So they've evolved to not have the best hearing around, but rather their ears act as giant or air conditioners that help keep their body a regular temperature. And it's not necessarily that they act as fans to fan air over their body, but more importantly, the huge amounts of arteries and veins that run through those ears, which allow liters and liters of blood to be pumped through there, thus cooling the blood, thus cooling the elephant down by cooling their blood. Right now, because it's not very warm, you'll see the elephant's not really flapping its ears that much, or almost on cue it started doing it. But in hotter weather, they will fan their ears more readily. And as it completely opens them, you may get a glimpse of all of those arteries and veins, but it's best to try and view that from kind of backward angle. We're a bit too broad side to it now, but you may have got a glimpse there. Possibly its calf is just approaching now. And let's see if it doesn't try and beg Mom for a drink. Holding its trunk up to smell us. The wind is blowing from us towards it, so it'll be getting a very strong scent from our vehicle, which it's busy testing. That's awesome. Hello, Jen. And no, elephants are not the only animals. Oh, look, it's trying to drink. I wonder if Mom's going to tolerate it. Looks like it is. We've just got a terrible angle here. Let me try and move the vehicle forward a little bit. Again, no, elephants are not the only animals to not scent mark. There are other animals who are not territorial, like these elephants, and because these animals aren't territorial, there's no need for them to scent mark. The wild dog are a similar animal. We don't see them scent marking like you do see the other predators, because they are not bound by small areas or territories. They've got massive, massive home ranges. So that's another animal that I can think of that doesn't scent mark. I can't think of two. Oh, buffalo. That will be another animal that is not territorial, that will not scent mark. So more often than not, it's the herbivores that are free roaming and have no major need to scent mark. Zebra is another one. Wildebeest. So a lot of the animals out here don't fight over property, and they are nomadic free roamers. I'm going to roll back a little bit. We're very close to this cow, so I'm just going to have to watch her reactions to us. And we can't free wheel because we've got a level spot, but sometimes it's actually better to have the vehicle running so that you don't startle the animal by silent movements. Very obliging. Ted is going to be able to get you some fantastic close-ups while we are this close. Let's maybe take a look at her eye so we can show everyone that kind of brownish coloration. It's not easy to see through that tangle of eyelashes. Looks like she applied a little bit too much mascara this morning. And look at the texture of her skin. Isn't this wonderful, getting these close-ups? There you can see that brown coloration in her eye. Absolutely awesome. You can also see where she's been pushing against vegetation with her forehead, and there's kind of, just like she's doing now, there's tiny little bits of bark and wood wedged into all those cracks in her skin. You'll also be able to see all the veins now as she's flapping her ears open. We've got a slightly better angle. There we go. Awesome, awesome stuff. We are so close to it. It's actually remarkable. We're probably only about 1.5 meters away from her bottom. what's interesting with elephants is that, unlike a lot of herbivores, their mammary glands are situated under their front legs, similar to us as humans. There we go. And you don't often usually get a good close-up like that and a good angle to see their mammary glands. And like I said, isn't it interesting how most of the herbivores out here will have their mammary situated at their rear end? Wonderful stuff. It takes up the whole road, basically. It gives you a good idea of just how big they are. Okay, well, as much as I love elephants, it sounds like Aubrey and myself are the only two people exploring Djuma and surroundings. Aubrey can traverse a lot more area than we can, and I think he's actually in Buffelshoek. So there's essentially nobody driving around Djuma except for us. And because Jamie is on foot, that means I want to try and cover as much ground. Oh, quickly, there's a Jacobin's cuckoo on the road. We don't see them often. Awesome, look at this. This is going to be the best view I've ever showed you of a Jacobin's cuckoo. And who knows, maybe it's a youngster that was already born this season, and I can distinguish the Jacobin's cuckoo from the Levalian's cuckoo or striped cuckoo. They look very similar, other than the fact that the Jacobin's cuckoo here has a white breast, whereas the Levalian's or striped cuckoo has a striped breast. Now, I've forgotten which animals these will brood parasites, so which animal, or which birds rather, which animals they will specifically seek out in order to lay their eggs in their nest and get another bird to raise their young, which is what could have happened here. And this could be a youngster already raised this season. But isn't it fascinating that some birds are clever enough to get other birds to do the dirty work and raise their young for them? No more sign of it, but I've just pulled out my bird app, and they usually parasitize bulbuls. Where's it gone? Still in there somewhere. Looks like it's hunting in there. Oh, what have you found in there to snack on? There we go, it's swallowing something. So it's usually parasitizes common bulbuls, which you don't see too often here, or the common fiscal, also known as a fiscal shrike. So those are the two birds that they'll usually parasitize. And isn't it fascinating that various cuckoos will parasitize specific species of birds? I think the Levalian's cuckoo is the one that looks similar to this, that will parasitize the starlings in this area. See if we can't get you a few more views, but this one seems quite relaxed. Maybe we'll get to see it later. This is remarkable. I cannot believe it's sitting so close to us. Usually I think it's because they're ashamed of their bad tactics of offloading their young to unsuspecting parents who then have to raise them. And maybe because this one is young, it doesn't realize what a sinister maneuver it's going to perform in the future. Clever though. Maybe it's got something to do with the moisture and the fact that it's so bedraggled and wet after a night out in the storm that it doesn't care about its reputation anymore and doesn't care that it's out in the open for us. So either that, or it's a youngster. Okay, well, like I said, it's time to keep exploring Djuma to try and make sure we are on the pulse with what's going on out here on our property, and also to make sure that we have got a good session possibly lined up for the sunset safari a little bit later on. So I'm going to keep exploring, and we're going to send you to Jamie.
And look what we had to find here. This is so cool. I don't know what it is. Again, it's one of those mystery things. Hopefully he stays. Look. Whoa. Again, launching himself off, demonstrating that incredible ability to jump up and disappear. I'm going to leave him be. I don't want to stress him out because this is more exciting than anything that's happened on Bushwalk so far. Lilac-breasted roller feather. So for those of you who started watching when I first started working here, we had this argument. James and myself had this argument. So I borrowed Nikki Austin's hat. Mine disappeared. It took an unplanned trip with Brent to Zambia. And James has had this old agreement with some friend of his. I can't remember the exact details, to be honest. He had this agreement with a friend that he would find them a lilac-breasted roller feather and in return would be given some great gift. And now James is a coffee connoisseur. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with James, he is one of the other presenters. He's on leave at the moment, but he'll be back very, very soon. And he had this agreement with a friend that his friend would bring back coffee for him, some special exotic coffee. And Nikki's hat that I'd borrowed happened to have some lilac-breasted roller feathers, at which point James Henry put out this heinous tale that I had stolen his lilac-breasted roller feathers and that I had to give them back, which of course I couldn't because they were Nikki's. Well, James, who's laughing now? I found one before you did.
I think those were viewers from Hawaii. They wanted
Viewers from Hawaii. Is that who it was?
Oh. The thing and then they would give the coffee from Hawaii.
That's the story.
That's what it was.
Ah, now do I get the coffee instead? Well, if you were the viewer that offered James the coffee for the lilac-breasted roller feather, I feel like I should be rewarded here. But just look at this beautiful colouring. It's incredible. That is bright blue. And I'm fairly certain that this will be a lilac-breasted roller feather. Now the question is, it's windy. Where on earth am I going to put it? I think perhaps this might be the best solution. Is that going to work? Is that going to stay? Fingers crossed. We're not going to lose that. By the way, while we've been doing this, there's a herd of zebra that's just watching our shenanigans, wondering what on earth we are doing. It's the herd that we very often see on quarantine. It's actually quite a big herd. They know we're here, and I'm not going to try and get too much closer to them, just because, as I said, it's windy. Don't want to stress any of the animals out. But if we go over here, I'm going to go sneak behind the bushes and try and have a look at them. Ah, no, I'm going to move off. There's a baby there. Hello. Yes, we see you. We're not going to try and approach you. Now, walking straight on in a direct line as I'm doing, if I start walking towards them any closer, they're going to run away. Usually your best approach with animals, if you are going to approach like that, is to try and take it at an angle, so it doesn't feel to them like you're coming straight for them. You might just be going past them. Hello, Zebbies. Good morning. Have you had a scary night last night, especially the little one, with the clouds rolling in and hiding all of the ambient light, and then of course all of the wind robbing them of their senses? It actually must be really, really scary to be a zebra out here. Ooh, I'm surprisingly cold. I know I shouldn't complain, and I know that a lot of you are experiencing the current blizzards and snows, but for me this temperature is positively Arctic. Just trying to find some more wonderfully interesting things to show you. Let's go look for some marulas and elephant dung. And I'm still looking for any sign of marula fruit in elephant dung, but while I do, Velma and many others, you were saying that my necklace is awesome. Thank you. You wanted to know if it was nyami nyami? Yes, it is. It was in fact a gift from Brent on his last trip to Zimbabwe, and he brought it back. And funnily enough, Yummy Yummy used to be my nickname when I worked at the other reserve before I met the Wild Earth crew. So it was funny, he didn't know that, he just happened to buy it. But Yummy Yummy, the river god, that guards all of the various rivers around that area. So yes, that is exactly what it is. So I know that you were saying it looks similar to what you have. And just before we finish up, thank you everyone for sending through your information about the millipedes laying eggs. I've learned something new today. That's why I love going out on bushwalk. And while I carry on, making my way to somewhere that I spotted while I was on drive a couple of days ago but haven't had a chance to explore, I believe that Scotty has found some leopard tracks to show you.
So, we have finally found some tracks. They are of a female leopard pointing towards us. No claw marks on the track, and that's indicative of a cat as opposed to a dog or a hyena. Sadly though, we are on our northern boundary, and the direction that this leopard has been moving in is north, directly across the road. And I've circled the tracks so that other people can continue following up to the north, but we cannot. And at least the animals have got free rein over this area, but sadly we don't, and we just have to drive on now and erase the fact that we have tracks. Anyway, useful to know that there was a leopard waltzing around Djuma. I wonder who it is. This area, it could be Karula, and the territory is forever shifting and changing. And because we don't keep as close a tabs as we would like on her, not too sure exactly her parameters and boundaries. Also the fact that we can't go into the properties adjacent to us, to the north of us, to the east of us, where she goes. We don't know how far her territory spreads exactly. But at least we've given the other guys a clue as to where they should follow up, and hopefully they'll return us a favour like that, saying that there's some other tracks coming into Djuma that we can then follow up on. This might be quite interesting. I think we might be able to find the chameleon in the same tree that we found one in yesterday. Well done to Sarah in Ohio, who has just got her grades back from a project that she did on the Inkohuma Pride. She did a lot of research on the Pride, both reading up on their history and also watching many drives where we viewed them. And she got an A, and not only did she get an A, but she did such a good job that her teachers are now going to start watching and joining in on Safari Live. So thank you, Sarah. And we can't stress enough how important it is that we need all of your help spreading the word about these live safaris. The more people that join in, the more fun we can have, the more toys we can buy, the more places we can take you. Now, this is the tree that we saw the chameleon climbing into yesterday, the one on the right here. Now, I'm just going to hop out quickly and see if it's not still in here. I'm guessing that it could be because it's cold, so it's unlikely that it would have moved, and B, it hasn't been a lot of time of daylight, and we left it quite late yesterday evening. And even in a small bush like this, you do need to make certain that you're not overlooking anything, because their camouflage is incredible. But I'm fairly confident that it is not here. So that I'm quite surprised by. I thought it would have been here still. I'm just going to make sure it's not walking around here on the move. Interesting. Oh, I was feeling lucky there, feeling hopeful. It came from the tree on the other side here yesterday, across the road in front of us, for those of you who weren't with us. So I'm just going to check carefully. It may have returned to the tree that it was in. They do actually hang out in set areas for maybe a week or so at a time. They will often even sleep in the exact same position in a tree every night. And I know that because I've taken huge interest in chameleons. And obviously driving around here day in and day out, you get to know these strange habits of the animals. Even to the degree where every night you drive home, you can see a chameleon sleeping in the same spot in a tree. So that's why I thought it was going to be worthwhile checking here quickly. But no joy.
I think he says there's a grasshopper somewhere.
A grasshopper?
Yeah.
Okay, so there was a grasshopper. Oh, there it is. It's the same elegant grasshopper that you saw with Jamie earlier. Here. Yeah, they are so beautiful. Orange, black, white, 3, yellow, 4, green, 5, a hint of blue, 6, reddish eyes and pink on the back, so we'll make that 7. 7 colors. Very good. Interestingly, the chameleon that climbed into the other tree on the other side of the road yesterday, it went straight past one of those little grasshoppers, and I think it's because of their bright coloration and also the fact that they feed on plants that make them nauseous. I'm sure Jamie told you about this. They exude a yellow liquid that is very distasteful and unpleasant, and that is what probably caused the chameleon to decide against feeding on that specific grasshopper, but they will definitely feed on the other grasshoppers of this area, the less brightly colored ones. Okay, Jamie's found you some more little critters on the bushwalk, so you're going to be back on ground level with her right now.
Now, it wasn't really my intention to do a snail-themed walk, certainly not what I expected when I first set out. But I just had to show you these snails because they're absolutely incredible. I had no idea they existed, and I have no idea what they are. But they are absolutely fascinating. So this one, the way that it's curled up, you can actually see the hard cover on the end of the foot there. So where it retracts into the shell, that's actually quite a solid casing. I had no idea that such a thing could exist. It's almost like the snail has evolved to retract, and then rather than have that soft, squishy, exposed part, it obviously would be easy for a bird to flip a snail over and then attack the vulnerable bit. It's actually got a essentially protected, it's almost like a hinge tortoise in its own way. Absolutely fascinating. And what's even more fascinating is that there's not just 2 of them, there's actually 3, all of the same species. If we have a look at this one's actually outside. I don't know how well we can get to see it. It's a very tricky, oh sorry Andrew, very tricky angle. Andrew and I navigating the restrictions of the bushpack. There you go, you can see it's sort of out of its shell. And while we watch it, Sunshine Jenkins, you were wondering how you can tell the difference between males and females. Now I know with giant land snails, they are essentially both. So the individual carries both male organs, reproductive organs, and female reproductive organs. And that's because when you're a giant land snail, moving at the pace that they move at in this wonderful world of ours, you actually have to be relatively flexible in the way that you move. So if you happen to get lucky enough to encounter somebody else of the same species, then you don't want to waste that opportunity. And so they've evolved a way of fertilizing each other and making sure that both walk away fertilized and being able to produce offspring. Whether or not that works the same way for all species of snail, I actually honestly don't know. I really, really don't know. In terms of telling the difference between male and females, I don't think there is a way unless you have a look at their genetics. So for giant land snails at least, I know that they carry both male and female reproductive parts. So you can't tell the difference because they're both. There's one other thing, speaking about arthropod and various other animals' reproduction. Where did it go? I did spot a reproductive termite. What have you got there, Andrew? Oh, the zebbies. Just keeping a close eye on us. Where did that termite go? Let me see if I can find it while Andrew shows you that incredible, what looks like an old cocoon. Look at the intricacy while you look at that, the intricacy of the shape. There we go. I've actually found it, sorry. Here it is. Now what he's doing, if we keep watching the way that it moves, they have very limited time where their wings actually function. So while it's lifting its abdomen up like that, come on, do it again, buddy. You're not going to attract a mate if you don't show some dedication. There you go. Spraying pheromones up into the air as a way of essentially calling another flying ant or another termite to it to reproduce. And then those two will go and start their own termite colony. How cool is that? Now, I don't know how lucky this one's going to be. We're pretty far away from any other reproductive termites that I've seen. Don't see any others around. And they're actually quite limited in the distance that they can travel. Whoopsie. And Bob, you were wondering whether or what different mammal species might eat a termite like this. Bob, there's lots of them. Aardvark will, as well as pangolin, although pangolin tend to favor certain species of ant more than that. If we were lucky enough to get to see an aardwolf, then that might be an animal that would eat them. Bat-eared foxes definitely would in this particular area. That being said, almost everything will try and snack on a termite if it has an opportunity. Almost every animal, not for example the herbivores, but something like, for example, let's say a bird of prey, they often hover around termite mounds where there's explosions happening. Any of the rollers, any of the bird species that eat insects, hornbills will eat them. And then things like baboons, monkeys might snack on them. They're very, very rich in protein. It's a great meal. And if you ever find yourself stuck in the bush and desperate for survival, you can actually eat them as well. They carry quite a high protein content. However, eat them sparingly because they have been known to cause upset stomachs. And if you do find yourself having to rely upon, for some unknown reason, a diet of termites, you might want to counteract it with a leaf from, should be one here, we're right in a drainage line, well done Andrew, a leaf from a silver cluster leaf tree. So something along the lines of this little tree. There's a couple of big ones, and I'll show you a big one when we get to the spot I'm going to. But the silver cluster leaf, I've just got a message through from Final Control telling me not to fall over if I have to try and pluck a leaf. And those of you who were watching will get the joke, because it was a silver cluster leaf tree that I was pulling out of the road. So what you can do is, if you find yourself with an upset stomach from eating some of those termites, you want to eat a silver cluster leaf leaf. Just one or two. You don't want to overdo things. Trust me, you won't want to eat more than one or two. And then nibble on them as a way of, gross. I don't even have any water on me. Oh, that was a silly idea. They're very astringent. So They're very astringent, so they take away all of your spit from your mouth. I regret that decision. I regret it wholeheartedly. But there you go, survival. Survival tactics in the bush. I don't want to stand on our poor, desperately... This is like, I'm trying to think what it's like, this poor termite. Like some kind of dating website. Desperately single termite seeks companion to start to have millions and millions of children with.
Looking for love in all the wrong places.
Looking for love in all the wrong places, Andrew says. That's so sad. Desperately sending out all the right signals and not getting any response. Oh dear. It's all about location, dear. It's all about location. You've picked the wrong one. The wrong neighborhood. Nice thing is that these zebra are so comfortable with us. They've got so used to us wandering through. And they've actually come closer towards us. And they're now just standing together feeding. Hey, zebbies? Eels. That's actually the reason I'm saying it's so nice to be at this distance and to see them so relaxed is for new viewers, when you're out on foot and you are looking for or looking at animals, they respond very differently to the human bipedal upright stance, so the way that we walk and the posture that we present to them. And 99.9% of the time, their response to that is actually fear. They've had hundreds of thousands of years of evolution that have told them that a human being means a hunting threat. So it's much like they would respond to a leopard or a lion. Trying to give them a little bit of personal space. And whilst I let this adorable little baby zebra relax a little bit in our presence, I don't want to scare him too much. Christopher was saying that that he knows that I have a fondness for all animals, but you're wondering if there's any animal in particular that I don't have a huge fondness for. And Christopher? I'm trying to think. I've already told you about the centipedes. Centipedes and I don't get on. It's one of those things I have tried. I need to change my way of thinking. I need to maybe learn more about them. Would be a good start in learning to love them. And then other animals that I'm not fond of, I'm not as fond of primates as I am of other animals. So baboons and monkeys, I don't share quite the same attraction to, and I don't know what that is. I don't know if it's the level of anthropomorphism. I still like them. I just don't feel the same way that I do about other animals. Okie dokie. Well, I'm going to carry on to my final place that I want to explore. In the meantime, let's see what Scott's been up to.
Well, for what it's worth, I don't like mosquitoes. Mosquitoes are probably my worst animal out here. I feel that they are incredibly rude, they are thieves, they steal our blood and leave you with an itchy reminder that they were there committing the crime. So that's probably my worst animal out here. The rest I'm quite happy with. And there we go, Chris in Arizona. I've got my worst animal that I can think of for now. Possibly another one or two that I can think of. But for now, it's the mosquito that comes to mind. So we are continuing the Djuma border patrol in the hope that we'll find some evidence of animals moving into Djuma. That's not to say that there already aren't animals lurking around there, but I like to start on the outside and then work our way in. At least this way now for this afternoon safari, and this is essentially what we're laying at. We're laying a foundation on the morning safari for the afternoon safari. I want to cover all the boundaries, make sure we know what's left, what's come onto the property, and then in the afternoon at least we've got a kind of better idea of what to expect or where to go searching for anything. course, the problem with this plan, it's flawed, because animals like leopard especially, possibly lion on a cool day like this, will move during the course of the day. So even though that leopard, these tracks we found earlier crossing out of the property, she could well come back during the course of the day. But at least, again, we do know where the last movements were. The question you ask is an interesting one. You'd like to know which question has stood out the most since being a presenter here on Safari Live, and to be completely honest, nothing really comes to mind. It's just a huge mash of many questions. And I guess it's kind of like the genres of what is your most exciting sighting question. There's so many different levels of excitement. It can be joy of seeing an animal for the first time, or excitement because you're fearing for your life. But Ginny, I simply cannot answer your question. Not one question does come to mind. What is wonderful though, and what kind of stems off your question, is that the amount of questions from people around the world of various different ages all combine in a wonderful experience for everyone involved, including myself. Because unlike having 6 guests on your vehicle for 3 days, and then they leave, and then the next bunch jump on for 3 days, and then they leave, you don't really get to know one another. You can only go so deep into the questions, or generally the questions are only so informed, and because most of the time, especially in this area and these lodges that cater for mainly for overseas guests, not South Africans, you're dealing with quite a simple safari goer, and it's nobody's fault. It's just the fact that it's their first time, therefore they don't really know anything. So the questions you're answering are quite elementary and basic. Your guys' questions, especially the seasoned safari goers, and quite often the younger viewers, ask very good questions because they're simple and to the point. It makes for a great experience, like I said, not only for me but also for everyone involved in the safari. It's not to take away anything from the first timers, and please keep sending your questions through, because having that mix of in-depth questions and more basic questions makes our lives a lot more interesting than, I feel, other safari guides who are taking regular guests around. So there we go. I didn't really answer your question, but that's what I've got for you, Ginny. Zelda on YouTube, you'd like to know if, when I am not working, I could take you and some of your friends out on safari, and essentially yes, I could. There's somebody coming past, heading to their lodge. Oh, it's Shanae. Hello Shanae, how you doing? Good. A lot of you actually know Shanae, so you can show Shanae. Tabs, how you doing? Cool. It's been a quiet morning, but now that I've seen you, it's been brightened up. Okay. Cool, thanks Shanae. Have a good day. We'll see you soon. Bye. So Shanae, interestingly enough, is from New Zealand, and she was one of our avid safari followers. And she has now decided to live a life out in Africa, and is busy completing some training at Nkoro, a lodge very close to us. And a lot of you will know Shanae from the Twitter feeds and all the chats that you guys get involved in. So we'd be happy to see her in her new African environment. what was I saying? Where was I going? Yes, Zelda. We technically can take you on a safari between our work with Safari Life, so pop me a message on Facebook and we can maybe have a Skype call and discuss exactly what you would like to do. Because we are all looking to try and make a little bit of extra money and keep busy, and this is a good way for us to do that, and a great way for us to take you on a safari in the flesh. And it's something we are trying to kind of fine-tune and work out. All of the presenters are interested in getting involved in it, and we're busy just obviously fine-tuning the plans with the powers that be, just so that we don't step on anyone's toes. But we're not going to go into the politics of that now, but feel free to pop me a message on Facebook, Zelda, and we can take it from there. Some hyena tracks here. I've gotten you excited, heading up Leadwood Road. I'll show them to you, because it's quite nice after seeing the leopard tracks where you couldn't see any claw marks, and I mentioned that you'll be able to see the claw marks of a hyena track. Again, not hugely easy to see, especially in this flat light, but you can possibly see at the terminal edges of the toes, which is on the other end of these tracks, you may see a few kind of scuff marks where the nails have kicked up some dirt. Also difficult to see here, but the hyenas will only have 2 lobes on their back pad as opposed to 3, like the cats. Well done to Marilyn, who's just racked up her 101st bird, along with pictures of all of them on her bird list, with the Jacobin's cuckoo. So I'm glad I could be of assistance, racking up one more bird for you. And hopefully it won't be too long before we find you 102. Maybe it will happen around the next corner. Now I'm so focused on any little fluttering bird I see, hoping that I can help you. I wonder what's going on in that dead tree over there, full of vultures. Again, sadly, we cannot go any closer to investigate. But there could be a reason for those vultures being there. Maybe there's a lion kill or a leopard kill. No guarantees though, and it could simply be that they're overnighting there. They do need to sleep somewhere, of course, and there's not always going to be meat below them. Either way, this will be an unsolved mystery. It's always nice to see some vultures perched in their stereotypical dead tree spots. Okay, it looks like Jamie's managed to catch up with the zebra on quarantine again. So off you go.
And what's actually been really nice about the zebra, hello guys, is while we've been wandering around them, we've just been trying to get around them to try and get to the other side, they've actually let us approach really nice and closely. But it actually gives us a really good opportunity to just chat a little bit about all of the animals' different zones, that they react differently when you enter into them. So at the moment, we are right on the edge of the zebra's comfort zone and their alert zone. So they're giving us two different reactions. Most of the time they're feeding, and quite comfortably feeding, but every now and again they're looking up to keep an eye on what we're doing. So those are sort of the first two zones as you enter an animal's personal space. In the comfort zone, they're perfectly relaxed. They're doing what they naturally do and they're ignoring you. In the alert zone, they're watching you. They're keeping an eye on what you're doing. And they're just making sure, sometimes displaying the odd sort of discomfort sign, might be shifting from side to side. Then, if we were to go a little bit closer, in this case, what they would do because they're zebra, oh, look at this, having a fight here. It's interesting. Oh, biting. Went to protect the foal. Shame. This is where the darker nature of zebra comes in. She gave a good kick. Trying to protect her foal. Hey guys, what was that all about? That was a squabble between females. And one of the females went for the foal, and we don't always know why they do that. It happens with both females and with male zebra. And they go as if to attack the foal, and the female, the mother of the foal, went forward to protect it. We don't always know exactly what it is that causes that, but we do know that zebra are incredibly aggressive creatures, or they can be surprisingly aggressive creatures. That is fascinating. Shame in that one. Did you see how that bite actually grabbed the back of the neck? Did you manage to get that, Andrew?
Yeah, looked quite sore.
It looked very painful. So zebra have those fierce, sharp incisors that are, and very powerful jaw muscles. Those of you, as I always say, those of you who've been bitten by a horse will be incredibly familiar with that particular feeling. Zebra are even more so because those teeth are used for survival in this kind of wild. But often they're used in sorting out skirmishes between the different herd members. And it's not uncommon for zebra mares to fight each other, either for the attention of the male or just because they actually don't like each other. Because within a harem, within a zebra's harem, most of the females are not related to each other in any way. So their interests are invested in themselves and their offspring, and not the good of the herd. Unlike something like an elephant, for example, you were with them with Scott earlier. With the elephants, they are more sort of geared towards the whole family protecting the group. Same with lion prides, everybody's related. With the zebra, the stallion collects the females from different areas at different times, and it means that they don't always get on. So when you see a zebra with a missing tail, quite often that's caused by one of those fights. In that case, the zebra actually grabbed the back of the female's head and held it down. What a powerful female. Obviously, maybe one of the more dominant. Usually the first mare that the stallion collects is the most dominant, and after that it sort of goes down lower in rank. And quite often the stallion intervenes in those squabbles between his females, but really interesting to actually see. Now, one more fascinating thing to show you is this little fruit chafer. Again, bushwalk testing my knowledge of the different insect species out here. I have no idea what it is. Looks like a harlequin fruit chafer, but it's not quite right.
You know something about it though.
I do know something about it. It does have a very nice pair of red dots on its head.
You're supposed to say it's beautiful.
It is beautiful. It is beautiful. It looks a little bit like a dice in reverse. Well, that was fascinating, and well done to Andrew for capturing quite an unexpected moment in the life of the zebra. I don't know what that was all about, but it's done now, and they've moved off into the drainage line, which leaves us free to go and get to my final destination that I have intended for this walk. In the meantime, let's get an update from Scott.
So, no major updates, but it's great to have you back on the vehicle. Isn't it wonderful that you can have the benefits of both worlds, chopping and changing between bushwalk and the vehicle? There are huge benefits to each of the two methods of exploring this wilderness area. And if I could choose, I would do a bushwalk most mornings and a drive most evenings in an ideal world. Hello to Anna Marie. You would like to know, are there any very old species or old living trees that have a very long lifespan here? And yes, there are. The leadwood tree, Anna Marie, is probably going to be one of the longest living trees in this area. It can stand for thousands, will grow for thousands of years, and even once it's died, stand for hundreds more years thereafter because of the incredibly dense wood that's basically impenetrable to any of the insects. I'm not sure how old your redwood trees live for, Anna Marie, so that would be interesting to know. But there are certainly some very slow-growing, long-living trees out here. Not nearly as large as your redwood trees, which are incredibly large. I'd love to go for a walk through a redwood forest one day. And I wonder what other trees are the longest living ones out here. I can't think of any off the top of my head. Baobab trees, which occur further north of us, are apparently also very long-lived trees into their thousands of years. Just arriving at another waterhole. It'll be interesting to see if the treehouse waterhole got a little bit more water than the Buffalofoot waterhole, which appears to be the case. Just needing to turn over a crappy radio there. So certainly a little bit more water. There's a terrapin bobbling about in the biggest pond there. And this will at least provide the buffalo and elephants, rhino and water with an area to wallow, and a few animals will also drink from these little muddy puddles for the few days that they last. But I'm guessing, unless we get more rain, this would have dissipated within 3 or 4 days. Christopher in Arizona, and you'd like to know what happens to the animals that live in burrows when it rains. Well, like you say, some of them will drown, some of them will be unlucky, and others will come out of their burrow and then just have to do some housekeeping thereafter. A lot of the animals are very, very clever though, Chris, and can often sense the rain coming before we can, and therefore they'll put up whatever defense is possible in their little burrows, but there will be some casualties, that's for certain. My plan is to now head further west in the hope that we're going to get close enough to the Arethusa and Sibambili guides to work out what's happening across there. We can traverse 2 different properties, and one is Juma, one is Arethusa, and they operate on different radio frequencies, so there could have been some action across there, and it's going to be worth heading across just to make sure we haven't missed out on any action across there. I'm interested to find out if they've had any luck locating the Inkahuma Pride of Lion, which were across on their side yesterday. It's all incredibly complicated, the traversing. So even though we can traverse Arethusa, we can't traverse all the places that Arethusa can traverse, if that makes any sense. And the same goes here at Juma. We are based on Djuma but do not have access to the same land that the Djuma guides have access to. They've got far greater amounts of land than us. So it's important to remember that every now and then we clarify the complications of traversing, and that it's not as simple as one would expect it to be. And that's just important to know for people like Zelda who are planning a trip out here. Don't base your thoughts on what we do here daily, because basically if you come out here as a paying guest, you are going to get access, regardless of which camp you go to, you are going to get access to more land than we have access to. So that's important to remember. Also important to remember that if you go to one certain lodge nearby, you may not be able to come onto Djuma, for example, or onto Arathusa. So it's not a free-for-all, only for the animals. Safari, thank you very much for providing us with an incredibly interesting fact on the oldest living redwood tree, which is 2,000 and something years old. Phenomenal. I wonder how they worked that out. That also is a feat in itself. So thank you though for that really interesting fact. It would be wonderful if anybody has some stats on the oldest living leadwood tree ever recorded, and then we'll have a good idea of who lives for longer, the redwood or the leadwood. We have just turned onto Shibam Road, which means gun road. A Shibam is a gun, but maybe it should have been called Mangwa Road for today, because we have just found some mangwa, which is a zebra in the local language, Shangaan or Shitonga. Chagra calling in the background. And it's interesting, I can't remember who asked the question earlier about zebra and that we don't see them too often, but there seem to be a lot of zebra around today, even ones we didn't see, but tracks I saw. The zebra are enjoying the Sabi sands at this time of the year, which is wonderful. Tanner in Oklahoma, you've stumped me. I have no idea how many stripes are on a zebra's body, but if you would like, you can take a screenshot and attempt to count and let us know. What I can assure you, though, is if you take screenshots of two different zebras, you will end up with different amounts of stripes, because each zebra has different stripes, as does each leopard have different rosettes or spots. But you may find if you count enough zebra stripes, you may get to kind of average amounts. The problem you're going to face, though, Tanner, is that it can be quite confusing and hypnotizing. Where does one stripe start and when does it finish? So good luck, and I wish you all the best in trying to ascertain the amount of stripes on a zebra. Well, the bird song really is fantastic this morning. They're probably rejoicing the fact that the flying reproductive termites are out and about, along with a lot of other insects. Just seen a dung beetle go flying past. They're going to have a surge in populations now as well. The flies are also out in abundance. One's busy crawling on my forehead as we speak. I'm trying to embrace the moments and become one with the fly, rather than trying to chase it off. So I'm just letting it do its thing here. And if you spend enough time doing this, you can teach your body not to get the awkward shivers. There, oh, no, another one flew off, but my friend is still here. His name is Frederick. We've already become very close, Frederick the fly. And sometimes we can have many flies on our face, 5 or 10. And as they move along, it can short-circuit your nervous system and give you a bit of a shiver. But I'm trying to train myself to prevent that happening. becoming friends with flies. It's desperate out here. But you've got to make do with everything you can get. It's just the mosquitoes that I will not tolerate. Apologies if I pronounced your name incorrectly. It's a little bit of a tricky one. And yes, we are expecting more rain. When, I don't know, but I'm sure rain will fall again at some stage. Possibly a little bit later on today, a bit of light drizzle. I don't speak to any weathermen. So I'm not too interested in forecasts. I just wait until whatever happens, happens. That's the way I operate. So I'm not too fussed with forecasts and therefore cannot help you with any official forecasts, which to be honest are often wrong. So not too sure, but rain will fall again. When, I'm not too sure. Safari Dean, I really do hope that your dream comes true, and let me know to come out to Djuma and also have one or two. That sounds like great fun. I can't express how much we would like to meet you guys and get to know you, because you kind of get to know us a lot better. We understand that effectively spending more time with us than us with you. We don't get to see you every day, and we don't even know what most of you look like. So, well, how old you are in your gender a lot of the time. So, even though we spend a lot of time with you, there's kind of massive chunks missing out of the puzzle here. And it would be wonderful to meet as many of you as possible in the future. So, Safari Dean and all of you, please try your best to get out here if in any way possible. Like I said, I'd be more than happy to help try and coordinate your safari and make it all come together and be a great success, which is obviously fundamental. A lot of you will be traveling huge distances out here, and we want to make sure that we don't skip a beat when planning your itinerary. So, like I said, Safari Dean, make it happen, and if I can help in any way, let me know. That is one thing that we can't share with you, and that is the experience of the sundowners, which are a great moments on safari. It can be quite tricky though, because at some camps where I've worked in the past, they've become so focused on the sundowners and the snacks at the sundowners and the drinks at the sundowners that you kind of lose track of the fact that people are here for a safari, not for a party or a cocktail, snacks in the bush. And as much as I understand that it's enjoyable to have steamed prawns out of a bamboo steamer in the middle of the bush with your fancy cocktail, a few lodges may be losing focus a little bit as to why people are actually coming out here. Although certain people go to those specific lodges for those specific luxuries. So it all depends on what you're looking for, and obviously everyone's entitled to enjoy various things in life, but in some situations, like I said, sundowners can almost become a hindrance, because as the sun is setting, you got that golden, beautiful light. It's a great time to take photos or simply look at an animal. And it's also often a time when animals are waking up and being their most active. And for me, it's sometimes counterproductive to be sitting there drinking while you could be actually enjoying some wonderful sightings of animals. So it requires careful planning, and sometimes you have sundowners in the dark, so they're more like moon uppers or stargazers. Just a little something to think about that we don't have to contend with here on Safari Life, because you're not forced to to stop, and when you guys are off on another vehicle, we can jump off quickly, stretch our legs, which is something that I hugely recommend when on safari. And most guys actually don't get their guests on and off the vehicle enough, because by the end of a 3 or 4 hour period being stuck in one position, you can seize up and become a little bit lethargic and tired if you don't get your blood pumping. Interesting, you can actually get rocked to sleep as the vehicles gently meander through these roads. And it's not uncommon for guests to fall asleep on your vehicles. Okay, over to Jamie.
Now, your current perspective from where you are sitting now, watching through the camera lens, as shown to you by Andrew, is exactly where that buffalo was killed and eaten by the lions just 2 days ago. The open, shady patch underneath a weeping wattle tree. And what's extraordinary about this kill site is that while we're looking around here, there's basically nothing left. The lions, the hyenas, the vultures, they have cleaned it out almost completely. All that's left is a slightly scuffed dead patch from where the lions were lying and where they were feeding on the buffalo carcass. There's not even a smell. Andrew and I were just discussing it because I was asking him how it smells to be where the buffalo was lying, and he said he can't smell anything. There's a bit of blood left over on the floor, a bit difficult for them to consume that. And that's where things like land snails, flies, will all come into play in helping clear us away and stop disease from spreading. A little bit of the stomach content still. And what's fascinating about this, so this was, for those of you who were watching, this was where the lions pulled the stomach contents out and then covered them with grass. They've now been uncovered, and I'm pretty sure a lot of that uncovering has been done by the insects that you're looking at the moment. So for dung beetles, they're not going to differentiate between fresh dung that's come out of the rear end and fresh dung that's come out of the stomach contents of a carcass. Everything works for them. This is one of the many species of dung beetle, currently looking to roll himself a nice dung ball, which he'll then use to attract a mate. They will head off together and dig down into the soil and then lay their eggs inside that dung ball, and it will provide the perfect nutrients for their growing youngsters. Awesome to see. And then that's pretty much it. There's the odd scattered bone around us while we look here. Some ribs, bits of shoulder blade, but even then the legs are gone, the big bones are gone, the vertebrae have gone. All that we're seeing is 1 or 2 ribs that the hyenas have chomped upon. It's fascinating. It's totally fascinating. You can see where the ridges have been gnawed on by hungry hyenas. And as a flat bone, they generally ignore the different, or the nutrients within the ribs. That's why we so often find rib bones around a carcass like this. The rest of them, the big leg bones, all of that will have been dragged off and crunched somewhere else. I don't see any others around here. But if you remember, for those of you who were watching, when we were sitting with this lion carcass the other day, I mentioned that there was a hornbill nest. Now what I want to see if we can do, and I don't know if it's going to work, obviously I don't want to keep the male hornbill away from feeding his chicks, but I want to at least show you where it is without getting too close and without stressing them out. So while we were sitting with the flat lions the other afternoon, or while they were flat, which wasn't all that often, I was sitting watching the male hornbill come and feed his chicks. Now, I've just seen him, as we arrived here, he flew away. He was obviously caught something to feed his chicks, and he's gone off in search of more. So I showed Andrew where the nest was earlier. It's in the hole within this tree. There, it's there at the junction. We can actually probably, since he's not here and he's not around, we can probably go a little bit closer and just have a look at it from a different perspective. This is what I couldn't do the other day because, you know, this whole area was one big pile of lions. We can now. I'm just looking around really carefully to make sure that he's not trying to come and approach the nest. But there we go. We've got a perspective of the entrance site, and you can even see some of the debris around it.
I can see something in there.
Can you see something in there? Little chicks moving. Yeah, I think we'll move backwards a little bit.
Let's get a quick shot and then come back.
Yeah, quick shot, and then we'll move back. We don't want to disturb them in any way. But that is the hornbill nest. That's where his chicks are hidden. You can see how packed around the edges with mud it is. Cool. Okay. You don't want to spend too much time there. You can see where all of his droppings from the chicks are. They've expelled those out of that hole. How cool is that though? That's epic. Let's move back over there so that we don't disturb them. We give them some space, and we give the male some space when he decides to come back with some food. Now, when I was sitting all the way over here, I could actually hear the chicks. Every time Dad came to feed them, I could hear them cheeping and begging and making a big fuss. So that's how loud they are. We move back a nice distance to about here, and we just wait and see. I'm not going to wait for too long. I don't want him to be in any way disruptive to his feeding processes. Where are you, Mr. Hornbill? We've got babies to feed. So essentially, now I would say that those fledglings are at the stage, or those chicks are at the stage where the female is still in there as well. And that might have been what we saw moving. So with hornbills, when they first lay their eggs, or when they first make their nest, the female hides in there and they block up the sides of the nest with mud, as you could see on the left and the right. And she loses her flight feathers and then lays her eggs, and she basically holds herself up in there. And they're entirely reliant on the male to come and bring them food. But it doesn't look like he's going to come, and I obviously don't want to keep him away from feeding his hungry chicks. Just one last thing to show you, actually two last things to show you. The snails that we were talking about earlier, have a look at this. This was found outside an ant's nest. Here's the open hollow, and there's the little cap that was sitting over, the little foot that sits over the entrance. How cool is that? I can't really hold it without it disappearing in. Try and get some light. Fascinating. One last thing to show you before we move off. And this is really, I don't know what's happened here. I don't know if maybe the kingfisher flew into maybe a tree or something. But we've actually got a dead woodlands kingfisher. So for those of you, it's a little bit decomposed. So for those of you uncomfortable with views of corpses or decomposition, maybe just look away for a minute or two. But it is an interesting sight. It's partially eaten by ants. As to how it died, I honestly don't know. But you can see the brilliant blues and blacks of the feathers. Awesome, awesome sighting. Shame. I wonder what happened to you, mister. But already starting to be fed on. Look at those feathers. That slight iridescence that adds to the blue and the shine. Absolutely stunning. Beautiful. All right, well, I'm going to move out of the area because I don't want to disturb the male, and I haven't seen him since we arrived, and he's usually back sort of every 5 minutes or so. And while I do that, let's go back and get an update from Scott.
Interesting stuff there. A pity the hornbill didn't come back. It's one of my favorite things doing a stakeout with the hornbills and watching them deliver a tasty morsel to either their loved one or their babies. I guess they're both loved ones. And interesting about that woodlands kingfisher, I wonder what happened to it. It's quite nice driving with the door open. It's like aircon for your feet. That's what I'm doing now, even though it's got incredibly hot. The Woodlands Kingfisher, I wonder what happened there. Interesting, maybe just the cold weather. It was an old individual, possibly. Couldn't take the storm last night. What's interesting is Jamie and Steph aren't too far from us over there, off to the left. As well as Andrew on camera, the three of them. Hello, Jamie! You would have heard that. Unless they're having too much fun working out what happened to that Woodlands Kingfisher. Investigating that crime scene. Oh, she says hello back. Great, she heard me. That's good. And it's a pity we can't do the same thing with Karula! Karula! That's the leopard. I'm guessing we're not going to get a response from her though. But we may find her. Who knows? This is an area where she does like to move. So maybe we will get lucky. It's not over yet. Matthew in LA. You'd like to know if there are any plans in place with regards to the invasive species in this reserve, and to be honest, I'm not too sure. It's possible though that every now and then they will do invasive species controls, but I guess it's up to the various landowners, and not only them but also the Sabi Sands as a whole. I know along the river, along the Sand River and the Sabi River, they may try and more effectively police alien plants because those major rivers are great transporters of alien and invasive species. But sadly, I don't know too much about the finer details, and it's not really my business. The inner workings of all these properties are up to the respective landowners, and I think it's best to just leave them alone to do whatever they feel fits. But we can try and find out for you. It will be useful to know what measures are taken. But as far as I'm aware, not too many, because there are a few invasive species that grow here, and I've never seen anyone trying to get rid of them. And obviously, I mean, the poisons and everything involved with regarding getting rid of any of these plants may be actually more detrimental than the alien species themselves. We don't have anything completely overwhelming any given species that I can see here, and most of the indigenous species are the ones that are flourishing. So it's not like we're getting swamped by any one plant that's causing a massive problem in the ecosystem, or at least not that I'm aware of. Therefore, I don't think there's huge need for any intervention. Sometimes, like I said, you can probably cause more harm than good trying to get rid of the invasive species, but a lot of the time, once they're here, are here to stay. Welcome to Ingwe Alley, the little road we've just turned onto. And Ingwe is a leopard in the local language. And Wiem, one of the cameramen, and myself have named this road. It hasn't really caught on other than with some of the Safari Live crew. It's not an official road yet on the map, nor is the name official, but happy memories of finding a young male leopard called Kunyuma, son of Karula, who we were trying to call out of her hiding place earlier. He used to hang around a lot in this area, and it's the huge benefits of having a young leopard on your property. They tend to stick to, at the stage where they've been booted out of home, but they're kind of still allowed in their mother's area, but she just doesn't want them to lurk around following her, eating all of her food, because she needs to start focusing on raising the next litter. So they tend to find a little area where they like to camp out, and this is where Kunyuma did it. Actually, interestingly enough, there's a happy memory right here, and we had tracks of Kunyuma coming towards where we are here, but I'm just going to walk down here to show you. There's a bit of a drop into a riverbed. So you can see I'm disappearing now, down, and I had tracked the leopard up into this area and found his tracks coming up this very steep bank. And rather than following on foot, I didn't have time to do that. I jumped into the vehicle and drove around here, and we found the leopard lying right there where I was walking. So I was just below him on foot, and we found him literally like 2 minutes before the end of the sunset safari. The squirrel that you can hear shouting now, chicka 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 chicka, is probably alarm calling at me. Unless, of course, we've flushed a leopard. There goes the squirrel again. If you can see them, it can be quite useful because they often are facing in the direction of whatever they're shouting at. Let's just carry on driving slowly and see if we can't see anything. I can't see the squirrel very easily. And I am fairly certain that it was alarm calling due to me. I'm a vicious predator, and that's why it makes perfect sense that the squirrel is terrified. Shame, squirrel, don't worry. I'll leave you alone. I'll let you live another day. Interestingly enough, the first day that we actually opened up this road, there was always this two-track that we're following, not as well-worn as it is now, but you could kind of make your way along this little riverbed that flows to our right-hand side. You can't see it from here, but there is a little riverbed there. But you'd get to a point where you couldn't go any further. There was quite a few logs and trees fallen down, and once we moved those logs out of the way, we could then go all the way through to the next road, which is called Twin Dams Road. And it was the first day that we actually opened everything up. And we had searched it 3 or 4 times. We did have tracks of Kunyuma in the area. And again, it was like 15 minutes before the end of the sunset safari. And I wasn't too sure what to do. And we had already checked this road quite a few times. So I certainly wasn't planning on checking it again. I think we were actually live when I asked VM what to do. I was out of suggestions, and I said, VM, what do you reckon? He says, let's go and do Ingwe Alley one last time. And we were approaching it from Twin Dams towards where we are now, so going in the opposite direction to where we're going. And after being on the road for about 50 meters, there he was, up in a marula tree, eating a duiker. Jackpots. We continued to view him the next day. Elephants came through that scene, chased him off. It was absolutely awesome. I'll show you the tree that he was in now. We still see him occasionally. It's been quite a while since we did last see him. And he had a brother called Quarantine. And they were the saviors for our leopard sightings back then. We saw those 2 leopards more than any other leopards from November 2014 until probably a quarter of the way or midway through 2015. Up over here on that main horizontal branch on the left there that Tebs is zooming into is exactly where he was perched, right there, slap in the center of your screen. That's where him and the duiker were when we saw him. Well, there's just 5 minutes left, and what will happen in those 5 minutes, I don't know. Neither does anyone really. If anyone does know though, please let us know. And please come here. We'll put you up in a wonderful spot. Here we'll look after you and pamper you. Because anyone that can read into the future of this wilderness would be hugely useful. I'm not sure who's just said this, but somebody's suggesting that we should go and pick Jamie up. And that's after she rescued me after the Nkuhuma Pride killed that buffalo while I was taking a run around the quarantine clearings. And I'll get your name eventually. Okay, I'm not going to get your name today, but thank you very much. It was a good suggestion. We're going to send you across to Jamie.
We're slowly making our way back along quarantine and heading back home at the end of a wonderful sunrise morning. And just to clarify for David Linru, you're wondering why we're not in a car and where my car might be. And Rusty's absolutely fine. It's completely perfect. It's just that we decided we wanted to, after the rain and after the wind that was blowing, we wanted to go and see what wonderful creepy crawlies decided to come out and show themselves. And I'm sure you can all agree, the fact that we basically went from one side of quarantine to the other and experienced sorry, I'm giggling at Andrew and his antenna. It makes it bushwalk, or is what makes bushwalk as much fun as it is. Now Andrew does the most incredible camera work. I'm chuckling at him, but he's got to navigate the same places I've got to navigate with an incredibly heavy backpack on, hold the camera steady, and have an antenna that sticks up about, there you go, you can have a look and see. And he's got to duck and dive and still manage to focus on what he's filming. So I'm sure you'll all agree when I pass on my absolute thanks to Andrew for the incredible shots that he managed to bring you this morning. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that you've enjoyed it. Thank you for your questions and thank you for all of the information as we listen to the singing woodlands kingfishers up above us. It has been an extraordinary morning, and getting out and about on foot is one of the best ways to experience and to find all of the best parts of the little aspects of the life that we get to observe around us. I hope that you have a wonderful day wherever you are in the world, and we will catch up with you with the sunset safari this afternoon. Cheers, guys.
So, Pete, finally, I got your name, and yes, it's a great suggestion, and I'm going to use it. I should have thought of it myself, so thank you for your assistance there. And we are not too far away, so we should gain sight of the intrepid foot patrol. And oh, I've seen them. And I'm going to pick up Jamie and leave Andrew and Steph to walk home, because they didn't save my life. It was only Jamie that did. It will also be difficult to get Andrew onto the vehicle with that big backpack. And he also does need some exercise, Andrew. Here they are. Steph has disappeared like a ghost into the darkness. And if you look carefully, you may see him peeking out from behind that marilla tree there. There he is. Jamie, we've come to give you the lift that I owe you for saving my life the other day. Andrew, you can walk. You need the exercise. Okay, you can sit on the bonnet then.
Cool. All right, so we're going to hop on.
And everyone, it's been so much fun having you with us on Safari Live this morning. I'm sure you're all enjoying a rare glimpse of one of our cameramen. Thank you so much for all your contributions. Really looking forward to this afternoon safari. Brent will be back, so he may be feeling fit enough to take a drive. He may not. Time will tell. Interesting, the inner workings of the backpack that gets you the foot patrol. So I hope you enjoyed that. And well done, Kirsty and Nick's in the final control. We will see you all next time. Toodle-doo.